Building a brand and your online presence is so much more than just a pretty logo. On today's Rainmaker Family Show podcast, we interviewed Rachel Jenks, where she talks about owning your differences and building a brand that attracts your ideal customer. Enjoy.
In the early days of Chelsea and I's service based business, this was pre Rainmakers, we were in the wedding industry. We had this grand idea to rebrand our website. And so we searched high and low and we found this website designer that we thought his style was really cool. And we liked his other websites that he has designed. They looked so sweet. And so we hired this guy and we were like, hey, we want to rebrand our website. And I remember the first thing he did was he sent us this big old questionnaire. And we quickly realized we had no idea who we were. We had no idea who we were. We kind of like knew what we wanted to feel like, and we kind of knew a little bit, but we were pretty early in our business at the time. And so we ended up just being like, well, we kind of just like your style, just like make us something cool because we didn't really know who we were. And the process took so long because we weren't clear on that. And then what he ended up making looked very cool, but we ended up not liking it.
Which is a
And
horrible story.
but I'm
Boiling
not
it
going to
down.
name names or anything. Don't worry. I'm not going to throw them under the bus.
So real.
It was an amazing design. Okay. But it didn't fit us because we didn't know us. And over the next 2 years after that, we really went on a journey to get to know are we going to be, who are we going to represent, who are we going to show up as in our business. And when we actually put language on that, and actually got around some people that asked us some good questions that helped bring out the gold inside of us, it allowed us to rebrand again with another website designer and actually have the website of our dreams, which actually attracted the perfect client that we had been searching for all those years. And that's why we're having Rachel Jenks on the show. She's not either of those designers that I talked about, but she does specialize in rocking it like a boss, owning your difference, and really honing in this brand conversation because it really is how you show up as your digital self online. And I think a lot of people make the same mistake we make.
Mhm.
They go off of like a cool look or a trendy design, but they don't really dig into the depths of who they are and actually who they want to attract. Because branding, I see it as a online billboard, right? It's an online magnet that's going to attract the right people and repel the wrong people. When you can set it up this way from the beginning, you're going to save a lot of time and pain because Chelsea and I, we've been there. We've been through a couple of years of just like having the wrong thing out there, the wrong representation of us, and it doesn't feel good. We don't want you to do that. So that's why we're so excited to have Rachel Jenks on the show today. Welcome, Rachel.
Thank you so much, Stephen and Chelsea. It is an honor to be here and share with the Rainmaker community today.
Now, have you heard a story like that many times from your clients?
Many, many, many times. Oh my goodness. That's one of those, if I had a dollar for every time I heard that story. And let me dig into why that happens.
Yeah.
So, I think that there is a perception of branding that is extremely outdated. And what I'm talking about is people think about branding in terms of it used to be in the wild, wild west, right? Where like somebody's logo was stamped into the side of a cow, ouch, to
Yeah.
make sure that nobody, stole what was theirs. And that is true for cattle branding. That is not true for branding anymore. So, in order to truly understand the power of branding, you actually have to think about it in reverse. We think about branding in terms of putting our mark on something, but that's not actually what branding is. Branding is the mark that every experience anyone has with you on any level makes on the minds of your customers and potential customers. So it's not just visuals, it's not just messaging. Those things are involved. It's the culture. It's the experience they have working with you. It's the customer experience. I know a lot of the rainmakers are amazing product creators, right? If they get your product and it falls apart and they can't reach you, that's branding. And that had nothing to do with your logo. So, to really understand the power of branding, we have to think about branding in reverse and that mark that experience of interacting with your company is making in the minds of your customers and potential customers.
Wow. That's so cool. And I feel like one other like mistake that I see a lot of people do is well, I see this other brand that I felt good about. And so I like their thing. I'm just going to do their thing. Right. And your big message, your big, I don't know if it's your mission statement, but I see it all over your website and I hear you say it a lot, is really owning your difference. Where did that come
Mhm.
from? And
Sure.
how do people start taking steps in that direction?
Sure. I love that you asked me this question because this is one of my favorite stories to tell. This is my own personal journey of owning my difference. So, if you're listening, maybe you have had situations in your life where you felt different from the people around you, right? I have never fit in any social circle in my life. Like, you guys know this about me, but those of you who are listening may not. I am 5 foot tall when the sun is shining. You know, I was the ballerina who walked funny. I would rather be on a hike than at the mall. I was the nerd who actually loved learning in school. All these things. And that was, of course, as a child, but even as I've gotten older, I've never fit in with any social circle in my entire life. And that word different had so much shame associated with it for me, and rejection and pain. And Stephen, very often our place of pain becomes our place of rain. And that's exactly what happened for me. So, the morning of my 38th birthday, I woke up to the voice of shame just screaming in my head, another year older. And what do you have to show for it? What do you even have to show for your life? And meanwhile, all of these people from my community, especially women, were asking me to coffee saying, "Hey, Rachel, I just want to hear your story. You're so inspiring." And I would look in the mirror and think, me? What's so inspiring about me? And I had a conversation I will never forget as long as I live with a business mentor of mine that day. And he just asked me, because he came in for our usual, like, "Hey, how's it going?" meeting with his laptop out. And I said, "Do you ever question the impact your life is really making?" And he closed his laptop and he was like, "Okay, where is this coming from?" And he said, "Rach, what are you measuring that by? Because you and I both know that the real measure of the impact of your life that matters to you is probably not associated at all with any of the measurements you're looking at right now." And, it's only when we feel like we have something to measure against that we feel like we don't measure up. And so that conversation led me to go home and get out my journal and, spend some time in prayer and uh, take me on a long, about probably 9 month personal inward looking development growth journey where I went back to those seasons of my life where I had felt different and what was associated with different. And what's so cool, you guys, is that as I went through those seasons, like childhood, there was rejection, young adult, there was rejection. But then there was the season when I stepped into being an entrepreneur. And now different had a sense of camaraderie with it and adventure and all of those things. And so that word different was really redefined and redeemed for me. And in the process of this, I began to see, everybody talks about what's your superpower? My superpower is being different. I was never made to fit in. Like nothing about my makeup, internally or externally, was ever made to blend in a crowd. I was born to stand out, and so were you, and so was your business. And I get so fired up about this conversation because when it comes to marketing and this conversation about branding, which by the way, branding and marketing are two different things, you need them both working together. That's a different conversation. But when it comes to marketing and branding, everybody jumps to, again, particularly in the online space, exactly what you mentioned, Stephen. And, oh, well, this person here is doing this. Oh, this person here is doing this. And yes, it's true. Success leaves clues, 100%. But there's a difference between looking for the clues and taking the insights and applying them to your own brand and being a copycat. And what I see so much, especially in the online space, is what I like to call chameleon crisis. Chameleons are amazing at looking like their surroundings and blending in with everything else, right? I've even seen a chameleon look like a Coca Cola can. How does that even happen? I don't know. That's not found in the wild, right? And being a chameleon is fantastic for blending in and not being eaten by birds. but it's a terrible way to stand out in your business. And so, if you truly want to stand out, and we know we're all here to make impact, right? This isn't just about selling a product or a service. We're here to truly serve people and impact lives and impact the world. I know that's your hearts very much as well. And so, in order to truly do that, you have to be noticed. Otherwise, you're going to be the world's best kept secret your entire life, which is a really crummy way to grow a business. And so, in order to be noticed, you don't want to look like everybody else. You want to stand out. But then here's the other piece of this, Stephen and Chelsea, is that I love Seth Godin, and his book, The Purple Cow, is great, but so many people feel like they have to go now buy a bucket of purple paint and paint themselves purple and make something about themselves the purple cow. And here's the thing, there is already something inherently unique about your business because there is already something inherently unique about you. You don't need to go paint yourself purple. You don't need to make yourself different. You just need to really figure out, what is the identity of my company? What is it that makes us inherently different? And then, as I like to say, own it in the marketplace and rock it like a boss.
That's amazing. Such good truth there, like looking at all your life stuff. And sometimes it is the things that did bring you shame or something that you've had to wrestle with that make you stand out and give you, yeah, your breakthrough becoming somebody else's and people connecting with you. And I was almost in my head, like laughing a little bit as you shared the chameleon story, because our son Kaizen has a book about chameleons and how they go to different colors, but it's about like that blending in. So I love how you just like tied that analogy. And I think creating a brand, you have to go inward and just really think about like, who do I want to represent? And what are some of the questions when you start working with a client, as far as maybe somebody who's more in the beginning stages? And even I'm sure it's the same thing with a more seasoned brand owner. What are some of those questions that you always want people to like digest and think about when they're creating a website or, yeah, just moving forward with their brand, especially on a social media platform?
Absolutely. Well, the foundation of every successful brand begins with identity. Because when you know who you are, you can function from that place. And like your story, right? You had these cool visuals and whatever, but it wasn't aligned with the identity of your company. So before you can develop any of the external brand, you have to dive into what the internal brand is. And the way that I love, love, love doing this with clients, and everybody says, "Oh, I never thought about it like that before," is looking at your company as if it was a person. Now, why do I do that? Because if you were to describe a best friend to me or somebody that you've known your entire life, you're not going to tell me about what they're wearing, right? The way that we describe the people that we have deep relationships with goes far deeper than anything on the surface. And so, if you can get out of your head, get out of your, oh, it's a marketing conversation, so I should be thinking about this, and just start thinking about your company as if it was a person. How would you describe that person to me? Now you're starting to dig in much, much deeper than anything on the surface and really start to dive into, what is my company's identity?
That's amazing. Have you do you have any fun stories of clients who really uncovered an identity like that in their brand where they're like, I never thought about it this way, but it was such a big shift for them, and what type of results that produced after they stepped out and kind of put that identity out in the world in the form of their brand?
Absolutely. I love these stories and I have many of them. So I'll kind of paraphrase them all in one. But something that has happened often is that somebody has come to us with an existing brand and they want to rebrand. And so we start digging in with the identity and they go, "Oh, wow. Oh, yeah, that is me." Like we've had stories of, you know, I've had this passion ever since I was young, and I never really had words for it. And you just gave words to it. And wow, like the number one thing we hear, and I love hearing this from clients, is, "Wow, you really get me. Nobody else really got me. You really get me." And that's because we go deeper and we listen. And so when you are able to figure out not even figure out, we call it a deep dive, right? It's really an analysis of the identity of your company. And then you start showing up that way, people respond. So, can I get a little nerdy and talk about brain science for a second?
Yeah, let's
Yes,
do it.
please
All
do.
right. So, this information comes from Dr. Darlene Mayo, who is an incredible neurosurgeon, neuroscientist who I had the honor of interviewing on my podcast, The Brand Boss Show. That is season 2, episode 6. If any of your listeners want to go check it out, it's fire. But this little nugget that she dropped has just really stayed with me. So, back to this idea, right, of clients coming to us and saying, "You really get me," and, digging into their identity and the results that come from it. This is the brain science that goes with it. And I could nerd out on this all day. So, the identity center of our brain is the same place where our goal center is stored. And if we have goals that are not congruent with our identity, it's probably why we're not fulfilling them. Now, over time, the experiences that we have and the, social and economic and cultural and, whatever happens to us in life creates these neural pathways that becomes like a web that almost blocks that identity center. And so it causes us to function and show up in the world in a way that's incongruent with who we really are. Now, as we untangle those and begin to align with our actual identity and function from that, this is what's so cool is that it's not just about us, but it literally has brain science proven the power to begin to untangle that web of neural pathways in our customers. So when we show up congruent with our identity, it literally has the power to jailbreak the minds of our customers, the minds of the people around us, so they can walk in their authentic identity as well. And we have seen this time and time again with the customers that we have served and with their customers as well. And the cool thing is, people whose identity center resonates with your identity center, and by the way, that doesn't matter if we're talking about you as a person or your company, both are true, it will attract them. But here's the thing, if you are showing up incongruent with your identity, something will feel off for them. And they might not be able to articulate it, but it will actually put them off and drive away the very people who were coming to you because they resonated with you to begin with. So there are so many examples of what this has looked like, but I wanted to dig into that brain science because I feel like it goes even deeper than that, right? And it can apply to any business, any situation, even the way that we show up in our own personal lives. When we show up authentic to our identity, we have the power to jailbreak the minds of those around us. Now, I don't know about you, but that's for sure the impact I want to have.
Yeah,
So
that's
true.
incredible.
I think of like even personal goals, right? Where
Mhm.
showing up with or actually framing as an identity can actually achieve a goal faster than just trying to do a thing. Like if I identify as a couch potato, then like, am I going to go on that run? But if I shift my identity, like, what would a runner do? Like to work out, like that's going to allow me to achieve some goal faster. And a lot of times things do have to become this identity for you to step into like habitual practices of, doing a thing or eating healthy or whatever that is. It has to be an identity shift. And sometimes that takes time. But even with branding, we've seen such power in that, in owning your difference, but also owning that identity. You can give it to your customers. And when I think of like the best brands, I think of people that when they buy that product, when they invest with that company, when they're, a customer of that brand, they kind of like it becomes part of their identity, right? And we've seen this throughout history,
Mhm.
of sometimes there's trendy products, right? Where it's just like if you wear this product, it's an identity statement. It's
Yeah.
like it's not even about the quality of the product or oh, I love the design. Sometimes it's I buy this product because of what it says about my identity. I have this purse because of who it says I am, not really even something else, right? Like it's so powerful. And I would say even with rainmakers, as rainmakers are listening to this, how can you one, let your identity come out in your branding, but also how can you give your customers an identity? When people come into our world, we call them rainmakers. We give them a new term for themselves. Even if they've tried other things and failed in the past, not in our world. In our world, you're a rainmaker. And then we give them a cape, right? We call it a cape. We learned this from Kaylin Poulin of Lady Boss. She said, we don't call them t-shirts, we call them capes, right? And so we're like, we love that. You give them a cape, and we give them a cape that says Rainmaker, right? It's a t-shirt. But we're like, hey, we're going to give you this cape. When you put it on, you're going to get passive income superpowers, right? And so it's one, we call it out in them, but then two, we equip them with swag, with things that allow them to claim that identity. Be like, I am a rainmaker. And it's like, it seems like small stuff, but it really is that mindset shift. So when maybe a wall comes up in their life, they no longer identify as, when a wall comes up, I give up. They're like, no, now I'm a rainmaker who's going to overcome this because that's my new identity. And that is so powerful. It's part of our story, but now it's a part of their story because they're choosing in. So I think the power of identity, the power of owning your difference is so valuable. And so I just want to encourage you, if you're listening to the show, dig into this. Rachel, what would you say like are good next steps for people? I know you have a ton of resources. How can they connect with you if they want to dig into this further? I know we're just scratching the surface of this conversation. And I think it's so good, but how would you encourage people if they're like, oh, this is stirring something in me, I want to go deeper?
So I love that you said that, Stephen, because I just want to tag real quick on something that you said. Because again, one of the things that I love about you and Chelsea and the Rainmaker community is as a Rainmaker, part of the culture, part of the brand that you guys have created is this how can I? I don't know anybody who has entered your community who faces a challenge and then thinks, okay, I'm just stuck, right? Why? Because part of the identity that you have given them is part of your identity of how can I? And so when it comes to this conversation of owning your difference, like don't look at this as like, oh, well, that's a big thing for me to figure out. No. How can I? Well, how can you? You can start very simply by what I talked about in terms of thinking about your company as if it was a person. How would you describe that person to somebody as if you were describing a best friend, right? There's one step. Secondly, I would love to take you on an identity deep dive. If you'd like to dig into this further, I'd be honored to do that with you. You can reach out to me at the Brand Boss Studio or brandbossstudio.com, rather, I should say, and you can schedule a free consult with me there. I'd be happy to have a conversation with you. We also have all kinds of resources for you. Probably the best one to send you guys to as well is the Brand Boss Show podcast. We now have 3 years of content there for you, all about this subject, all about owning your difference, what that looks like in various industries and various companies, and practical steps that you can take. But I would say the very best place to start is to really dig into the identity of your brand. Because when you know who you are, you can function from this place. And from there, everything else becomes, how can I?
I love that, Rachel. Those are some key nuggets right there to just dive into even more. And I love when we were talking a little bit earlier, when you had on this neuroscientist and just talking about that. And even with buying, it's like you are doing a disservice to your people by not showing up as fully you. Not only is it there like a monetary money that comes along with that, but also like you might reflect people or deflect people that would be a good fit, but it's because you have to figure out you first. And from there, everything else flows. So that is such amazing wisdom. Thank you so much, Rachel, for being on. Make sure to check out her podcast and the amazing resources that she has available for you guys. Thank you so much, Rachel.
Thank you.